Good afternoon, and welcome to First Alarm Family First. My name is Carolyn Acosta.
And I'm Jen Herrera. We are so excited to be sitting next to each other to have an important conversation, and so excited that you guys are all joining us. We chose today for the first episode of First Alarm Family First with a lot of intention. Today is World Mental Health Awareness Day. It is something that we are passionate about. It is something that has hit very close to home.
Yes. The mental health of first responders and their families is our main concern. Since this is our first episode, we wanted to give you a little background on ourselves.
Yeah, so my name's Jen Herrera. I have been a anchor, reporter, traffic reporter, weather person, everything pretty much down here in South Florida for the past 20-something years. On a much more personal level, the two most important men in my life are first responders. My father is a retired Miami-Dade firefighter. His name is Bill Herrera. And my husband, Jason West, is a current Miami-Dade firefighter. So being the daughter of a first responder, being the wife of a first responder, is a special club, I would say, for sure. A lot of people don't realize what that comes with, and that's one of the reasons that we are having this conversation on First Alarm Family First. And again, this is the first episode, and we can't wait to share stories. I'll share stories of what it was like being raised by my dad. That's for a whole other episode, including when he told us that we weren't allowed to date firefighters, and I ended up marrying one. Carolyn did approach me a few weeks ago. We went to high school together. We run in the same circles. Our husbands worked on the same department together. And she asked me if I would take part in this journey with her when it comes to spreading the word about mental health, mental illness, PTSD, and the world of first responders. I was so happy that she reached out. We've had some tough conversations. You will soon see she is one of the toughest people you will ever meet and is handling the unimaginable with such grace. And when she asked me if I would help get the word out and start the conversation and spread the message, I said, absolutely. And so today is day one of what we're trying to do.
Yes, I'm super excited to be co-hosting with Jen. This is very close to my heart. In July of this year, I lost my husband. He lost his battle to PTSD. Alex was a well-respected Miami-Dade Air Rescue lieutenant who served his community for 25 years, 17 of those on air rescue. But even though he was a hero, he was battling his own mental health. So we started the foundation, First Alarm, to break that stigma and create more awareness within the first responder community. With that, we've also started a podcast, Jen and I, called First Alarm Family First, to have that open, honest communication with first responders and their families, and open up more dialogue with mental health and their career and all the things that it involves.
You have been nonstop since Alex's passing. You have made it your mission to get the word out. And, we often talk about being part of the first responder family. Your brothers and sisters step up for you, right? Mm-hmm. They join in the effort. And it doesn't matter if you're a firefighter or if you're a police officer or if you're military. The response that you have gotten, it's wild in the best way possible.
Yes. Their brotherhood is amazing. They really have all come together and helped my son and I through this really difficult time. It was something that obviously we didn't expect. It was something unimaginable. But with all of that, there's something beautiful that came out of it. I just see the love and the camaraderie that's there with them, which also makes me, feel that when one of them is down and one of them is going through something, there is that love and there is that compassion. They just don't really talk about it too much.
Since our focus as the spouses of first responders is to really make this a comfortable place for spouses to ask questions and to let them know that what they're thinking, what they're feeling, how they react isn't wrong. It's very natural. So while you and I have had conversations, chances are this is the first time somebody is watching. We're very candid when it comes to what we've learned and the conversations that we've had. So for people who are hearing your story perhaps for the first time, tell us about Alex.
So Alex was pretty amazing. He was a dedicated Miami-Dade Air Rescue lieutenant who loved his career. He had a passion for it and he was good at it. But he was also an amazing husband and father, friend. He just was that guy that, would drop anything and everything to help anyone. It didn't matter what it involved, how much stuff he had going on in that day, he would do it. So he was pretty remarkable that way, but also, and for the same token, he didn't take that time to take care of himself. As much as he thought he was, it was, the career got to him. It got to him mentally.
And I don't think Alex is alone when it comes to our first responders. They take on a lot in the 24 hours that they are on shift, and they don't often come home to talk about it. I remember when I was a little girl, I was a kid, but looking back now, you can reflect on things. And I remember we would be at our house in Hialeah, and the house phone would ring because there weren't cell phones, right, at that time. And I would hear my mom on the phone, and I would say, "Oh, who was that?" And she would say, "Your dad. He just wanted to make sure you guys were okay."
Yes.
And at the time, I was like, "That's weird. Like, why wouldn't we be okay?" Well, fast forward, and you become the wife of a firefighter. You realize they must have seen something really bad. They must have seen a really bad call, because for them to call and say, "How are the girls?" It's their way of checking in. With both my father and my husband, Carolyn, I have to tell you, I don't recall, maybe less than a handful of calls that they actually came home to vent about. My dad never. Because that's that whole old school firefighter mentality,
Right.
which is a whole episode for a different day. But even Jason, I can tell you, he never really opens up much about what he has seen on shift. And he's worked at some pretty busy stations, and not busy in a good way. Did Alex often open up about what he saw?
Not really. He would usually keep it inside. I know he had a tough day or a rough night because he would come home and tell me it was rough. But as far as opening up about what he saw and stuff, not really. He would just keep it inside. He was more of, I'll leave that at work. I'm here with my family. Let me try to disconnect. But I guess looking now, I could see the mannerisms. He was very anxious. When he was on shift, he would call us too, and he would call and check up and make sure that we got to our location, to always wear our seatbelt, just all the things that, he saw it all. So he knew that this was very possible and could happen, versus somebody who says, "Oh, I saw it on the news and it probably, what are the chances?" So I think with him, since he saw it all the time, just like your husband and your dad, they was very real to them.
Yeah. And I know that since, sitting down with you 3 weeks ago, my line of questioning is much different when a shift is over. I'm more interested, and that probably sounds horrible, but that's honest, right? I'm much more interested in what the shift has been like, what it's looked like, if it was overtime, how many calls did you run? Because I will be the first to admit, I'm like, okay, your 24-hour shift is over. Time for your 48-hour shift at home.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I did the same too with Alex. Looking back, it's like we would, he would be on shift and I would be at home tending to our son. But, the second he walked in that door, I'm like, "Tag, you're it. I need help. The dog took a shit, like I need you to help me,
Clean it up.
I need you to help me. But it's looking back now, I think I would obviously do things differently. They see so much and they go through so much that it is a very mentally and physically draining career.
I remember, I worked a lot more when my kids were little. And this day is like vivid in my mind. I remember I was reporting and I got home probably at like 8:00 at night, and the girls were like 2 and 3 years old. And I walked in the house, and like every single toy chest, every single cabinet that you can imagine that had all of their like magnetic doll clothes things and Barbie dolls, and when I tell you everything was out in the middle of the living room, everything was out. And my youngest daughter, I should have known then that she was going to be, the one to push me, had a Sharpie in her hand and was writing on the rock wall in the living room. And I remember being like, "Jason,
yeah,
like, well, I don't understand. How did this happen? How is this not cleaned up by the time I got home? How does our 2 or 3-year-old have a Sharpie, literally have a Sharpie on the wall?" I'm walking in from work and he's in the kitchen. He was making dinner, in his defense. But I remember being like, "How does this happen?" Blah, 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 with no concern at that moment of what his shift was like the day before. Right. The fact that he didn't sleep, that we had 2 toddlers, and I would go to work for 10, 12-hour days, that my shifts were long too, with no concern. And I think that is such an important conversation that I can't wait to have more of with fellow first responder spouses.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like, sometimes we just don't obviously it's an amazing career. I think being a first responder, you have all the great benefits and stuff that come with it. You have time off sometimes with your family more than other careers, but also it's all the mental and physical stress that comes along with that. And I think that too, as spouses, you just don't really look at that, and you just see it as like you had a chance to sleep at work, versus me, I can't sleep in the office, but that's not the case. It's that fact that they've been through so much, they need time to rest, you know.
I admire you that you're able to have these very honest conversations. The conversations are tough too. We talked about this early on when we did something for social media, but the word suicide carries a stigma all on its own. How has that changed for you?
Well,
now?
It's completely changed, Jen. I feel like back before this all happened, obviously, I thought of it as an easy way out, and I feel like that has changed completely. I know, knowing my husband, and I know that he was in such a desperate moment that I think that he felt that he was doing us a favor. Like he was just such a burden for us, for his family, and just, he needed to just go away because this was just too much. And I think that even hurt him so much that he was putting all this, which in reality wasn't happening. It was very irrational. So the word suicide has completely changed for me. I can't. And now I look at it as, you know what, these people are in such desperation that they really truly feel in their hearts that they're doing their families and their friends and their community a favor.
What about today? What about World Mental Health Awareness Day? Because again, I will be honest, I didn't know there was a World Mental Health Awareness Day until our conversation started to happen, until this platform happened. How did days like this? Last month was National Suicide Prevention Month. How do all of these things resonate differently with you now, especially as far as getting the word out?
Well, you know what? The fact that there's a day for it and a month for it just is alarming to me too, that it's happening so often, and it's something that really wasn't discussed before, at least for me. I mean, obviously, I don't think people talk about it because it is such a taboo. And since it hits so close to home for me, it's all I see now, it's all I want to talk about it. I want to bring it up. I'm not afraid to say the word suicide because it's something that is happening right now in our society, and people are doing this to themselves. And I think that this is a very crucial thing. And unfortunately, it's happening a lot in our first responder community that, they're obviously there to help us, and they do all the things, but they also need help too. And they need to be okay to ask for help.
The numbers are actually scary when it comes to what's happening among our first responders, police officers, and firefighters. And that's for another episode. We're going to break down those numbers, take a look at them, try to figure out why and how we can do better. We've been very pleased to see that there are resources available for our first responders. There are a lot of resources available, some through the departments, some through the counties, also through unions, some, kind of like what you started with First Alarm Foundation. But there is a disconnect when it comes to our first responders taking advantage of these resources.
Yes.
And that's where I truly believe some of the power lies with the spouses, the parents, the loved ones, because they don't want to be seen as weak. Right. But if we can let them know that it's okay, that the resources are out there and support that, because I mean, think about all the people we've talked about, how many resources there are, but they're not going.
Right. And they're not using them. And, it's breaking into that culture. It's a culture, the police, law enforcement, and first responders, they wear that uniform and they don't want to show weakness. And it's not a sign of weakness when you need help. Obviously, you guys are seeing so much and they're doing so much that I feel like this is needed. This is should be a regular part of your week, checking into a therapist, talking about what you've seen, what you're feeling. You're human. You feel emotions. This is very normal. But I think is breaking into that stigma and making it okay. And hopefully they'll eventually be okay to use those resources because they are available. They're through their department or through the union. They're there. They just have to go and use them.
Why do you think, Carolyn, and I don't mean to take away from anybody else, but Alex's passing specifically had a huge impact on our entire South Florida first responder community and beyond. why do you think Alex's passing has had what appears to be a larger impact than others?
I mean, for me, Alex was everything. He was such an amazing soul that I feel like he was even same as amazing at work too. So I think that he was just a special person. And I'm not saying that anybody else wasn't. I just think that he impacted so many people, just who he was. And to see somebody so strong and so well respected, having gone through that, I think it was eye-opening. And it was unfortunate that it had to be him, for it to make a difference. But that's what I feel, again, in my world, he was everything. And I didn't realize that he was that big in his career as well. And even, he taught at Miami-Dade College. He was just such a great individual. Like, there's no other words that I could say for him because he was awesome. I don't think I have anything truly bad to say about him at all.
Well, and that's the thing. Anybody, when you bring up Alex Acosta, nobody has anything bad to say. It's just, and I think that's why it was so hard, especially for everyone to kind of wrap their minds around what happened. He was a heck of a dad, too. How's your son?
He's doing good. He has his moments. I think that, he's a 13-year-old, so you get those like hormones, those testosterones, all that stuff is, happening. But he's doing okay. He's staying busy. He's definitely, he has his moments. There's moments at baseball or moments that are happening at school that he does, miss his dad. And, I do my best to remind him how much his dad was present when he was here and how much he loved him. But, I can imagine in his head, too, it's something difficult to grasp because he had no idea. Like, he woke up to this. Right. So he didn't know his dad was struggling with anything, really. I mean, he knew dad was a little bit, like, moody here and there, but it wasn't like we talked about it, at home because there was that stigma, mental health. We're not going to talk about it. We're not going to worry anybody.
Right. Talking about the kids, and I was watching the video of our kids popping up on the screen. I think that this is a good opportunity to discuss how it impacts kids, how our husbands leaving impacts kids, especially in the first responder world. We know that South Florida got spared yesterday when it comes to Hurricane Milton. The rest of Florida, the West Coast specifically, not so much. And of course, we are thinking about them and everybody in North Carolina and Georgia who were impacted by Helene ahead of that. But on this subject and first responder families, when there are natural disasters like we've seen the past couple of weeks in Florida, our spouses leave.
Yeah.
They're out of there. I know I remember experiencing it for the first time with Hurricane Andrew as a kid, living in Hialeah, and we had to go to my neighbor's house. And I remember thinking, like, what do you mean dad's not going to be home in a hurricane? And then I remember him being gone. I mean, I could be remembering this incorrectly, but for a long time. I mean, I want to say like at least a week, maybe longer. And then him coming home and talking to my mom. He didn't talk to us, but I remember hearing him talk to my mom and describing what Homestead looked like and how my dad, who knows Dade County like the back of his hand, did not know where anything was. There was not one street sign that he had no idea. It was just total devastation. And I remember watching him talk and the impact it had on him. But that was it. Like, it was that one day he got home, he talked about it. He talked about a dining room table that had a vase of flowers standing and the entire house was gone.
Oh my gosh.
And then that was it. And then fast forward to Jason having to cover natural disasters. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I know that you had a very similar experience, almost on a larger scale, because when Alex traveled, he did not stay local. He traveled to different area codes.
Yeah. So if he was on shift and he was, because his station was air rescue, they would usually have to move the aircraft to a different hangar if he'd be out of the county or, somewhere else. But he was also on the USAR team. So when they would have a natural disaster, either be it in Florida or anywhere else in the States or sometimes in the country, he would have to go. So they would prepare. They would have calls that would come through, I remember. And he would be like on a wait list, and then they would call and it was time for deployment. They would leave a few days before the actual storm hit. They would go down to headquarters or wherever they would stay at, and we would just call. He would call us whenever he had a chance and just kind of give us an update of what was happening. He would tell us, we're leaving tonight at 4 in the morning, we're leaving, and then they would take off, and after the hurricane hit, they would go and go help and rescue whoever needed rescuing, or just, they would go to the area and kind of just look around and see if anybody was left behind, kind of thing. But yeah, and it was long days and long nights for them. I do remember that.
Yeah. And what was it like? I mean, I know the answer, but I want you to share. Like for you, you're home with your son.
Yeah.
And he's gone. You don't know how, when that happens, you don't know how long they're going to be gone.
Right. You don't. Yeah. So, I mean, we got used to it after, it happened quite frequently, if not once a year. But it was okay. My son he gets a little anxious too. So we would have to tell him, your dad he would kind of get a little upset when dad would have to go. So I'd be like, he's going to be fine. He's going to help other people, and this is what he does for a living, so he kind of understood. And dad would always, whenever he could, would call and check in and stuff. And we would just prepare a few days before, made sure everything was inside that needed to be inside, made sure we had batteries, the generator, things like that. But with Alexander, it was, they're younger. They want their parents there. They want them both there,
I remember, and I don't remember what storm it was. It was a few years ago. And it was the one that was literally coming straight up the state of Florida and all of Miami-Dade. Everyone had to report. So I remember Jason was on shift and him saying, "You've got to get the girls out of here." And I was like, what do you mean I got to get, like, what? Yeah. What are you talking about? And he's like, "You have to get the girls out of here." And I'm like, by myself? Yeah. And he said, yes. And so I would just remember this feeling like, okay. And just, driving up the state, which, gosh, I don't remember the name of that storm, but it ended up impacting the northern part of the state, the central part of the state more than South Florida. But packing up the girls, maybe they were 10 and 11, 9 and 10, I don't remember, and just leaving. And so I'm leaving my house. I'm by myself. I'm with my daughters. I'm driving north. And my husband is literally staying in the bullseye at that point of the storm. It's an incredibly unsettling feeling.
So I think I might have gone away too for that storm. If I'm not mistaken, it was the one that hit the Keys, I think, the worst, or if not, I think it was Irma, one of those. Okay. There's just been so many.
Irma does sound right.
We actually took off to New York. Alex called us. He was deployed and he's like, try to find a ticket out of the state of Florida as soon as possible. And we ended up going to New York, my son and I and my sister, and we stayed with an uncle over there. And I remember that luckily nothing really happened at home. I think we lost power. There was no power for like a week or so back home. But it took us another week to get back because there was no flights back to Florida.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say this, and it's another thing that I'm not proud of, but we're all about being honest here on First Alarm Family First. I remember driving back, getting home, and I couldn't wait for Jason to get home to help clean things up.
Yeah.
I mean, how now I'm like, how horrible.
Right.
How horrible is that?
I know, I did the same though. I think that, again, we just underestimate, I think, what they're really seeing and doing. And I think that's why this podcast is so great. I feel like we can talk about it and we can, enlighten us because we don't know what's happening, what you guys are seeing, what's truly, involved when you're deployed or on a shift or when you're seeing these accidents because we don't know. So then again, it's like you can't blame us because we don't know.
Right. No, it's learning, right? It's about having these conversations and learning. And I think this is a good moment to say that we are thinking about all of our South Florida responders who have been deployed elsewhere to the Carolinas, to Georgia, to the Panhandle. I know since Helene that you guys have been working very hard and seeing the unimaginable. I would encourage you to speak to your spouses about it and be aware that there are so many resources available. And if a spouse of a first responder sees this, please, I hope you realize this is a no judgment zone. I mean, we are putting things out there that we're not necessarily proud of. And maybe, think twice, consider your reactions when your loved one does come home, because it's never good, right? In a time of a natural disaster, it's never good what they are seeing. And yes, it's not easy to be home with the kids. We know that too. But we got to really keep them in mind. And, I don't know if there's like a formula of questions to ask, especially because, I know at least with my father, definitely with my father, and with Jason, the information just doesn't flow easily necessarily.
Right. And I don't know if it's just like I don't want to say, because I know this career has men and women, but like it's a male thing. I always thought like, oh, it's a guy thing, like my husband just doesn't like to talk, or maybe he's just, so I would take it more to that end. Like he's just a guy who doesn't want to talk versus me. I know if I would come back if I was deployed, I'd be like, this is all the information. This is what I saw. This is what I did, but I mean, also that was like, maybe I should just respect that like fine line of they don't want to communicate. They don't want to tell me what they saw. But I mean, it's again, I think that's why this podcast is good, so that we can open up that dialogue and have conversation. I think if we know what they want and what they need, just like in any kind of relationship, it's communication.
I think to include the kids in that communication is huge too.
Mm-hmm.
I remember during COVID, Jason coming home and he was talking about alcohol, like rubbing alcohol and not having enough alcohol. And he couldn't believe that there wasn't alcohol, when he would go on shift, or I don't remember the exact details. And the next shift that he went on, we have like that little mantle, that little area by our front door. My oldest daughter had on a paper towel and marker written for daddy to take to work. And it was like Bath and Body Works fragrance antibacterial. And so when we were talking about alcohol and germs and COVID and everything that was going on, we did not include them in that conversation. But obviously, she was paying attention.
Right.
Like I remember I was like, oh my God. So I think to include them
absolutely
in the conversation as well.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, they're there and they're listening. As much as we think that they're not, they're there.
Yeah.
And I think that too helps them with any kind of fear that they might have. Is mom and dad safe, and we just kind of have to, let them know that this is what they do for a living. This is the things where they're going to be staying. I think, letting them in on what they need to know and hear, I think is great. I think it's appreciated by them too.
All right. And we want to take these last few minutes to remind you and let you know where you can find us and what we're all about. So first, let's talk about the foundation, First Alarm.
Yes. So First Alarm has their website. It's firstalarmfoundation.com. If you'd like to visit it, make a donation, please do so. We also have our Instagram and our Facebook.
And that's a chance for people to explore resources in the future. I mean, it's a work in progress. This whole thing is a work in progress, but this woman has not slowed down. She is just going. You're going for it. So lots of resources will be available there. Alex's story will be available there as far as why we are doing this. So there's the First Alarm Foundation, and then the podcast that we hope to do a few episodes, at least 2 episodes a month, First Alarm Family First. You can see us here. We need to take an opportunity to thank so many people who have really stepped up. And when I tell you in a matter of days, the First Responder Resiliency Foundation through Local 1403, thank you so much. Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, thank you so much. The county has been very supportive of what's happening. You have so many ideas as far as helping first responders, and it's a long list.
It's a long list, and you were working on it, and I think that, this is something that was needed. And we're excited. We're excited to embark on this journey. Jen and I, we feel like this is something that we need and we'll be good at.
Yeah. Everybody here at Community Newspaper, we want to thank you, Grant, Michael, for giving us a microphone, for giving us a platform. Rachel over there producing in the corner. Yes, thank you very much. She answered a ton of emails. And everyone believes in this conversation. And I encourage you to reach out, to check out the foundation on the website, to reach out to Carolyn, to reach out to myself. You can see our Instagram handles on the screen there, because we welcome guests. We want to have roundtables with other first responder spouses. We want to keep the conversation going. And we cannot say enough how important it is to be authentic and to share your story, and there will be zero judgment, because that's really important, especially in the conversations that are tough to have.
Absolutely. Zero judgment. I mean, this is I feel like this is something that, this is our area here. We can talk about things. We can bring things out. If you guys have any suggestions, recommendations, we'll send a Google sheet out, and you can just give us ideas of what you want to talk about. If you'd like to maybe come on and talk with us, we're very open.
Yeah, we'll have some experts on. We're experts when it comes to our experiences, but definitely some therapists and people who can talk more about the resources that are available. But thank you guys so much for sitting with us these past 30 minutes. You did really well.
Thanks.
I mean,
well,
I'm very impressed.
I love working with you, so I think it makes it very easy.
And we'll remind everybody to sound the alarm.
Save a life.
Till next time, guys.